Hi again. In Edmond C. Gruss's book, The Jehovah's Witnesses and Prophetic Speculation, we reach chapter 6. This chapter is entitled False Advertising, False Prophecy, and False Christianity. In this chapter, it will be shown that the Watchtower Society is guilty of false advertising, that it stands condemned by its own words as a false prophet, and that it requires its faithful membership to accept unreservedly its pronouncements under the threat of disfellowshipping and ultimate annihilation. First, false advertising. After the reader has studied the book to this point, he cannot help but be aware of the fact that the Watchtower Society has taken its readers through a maze of conflicting and contradictory interpretations. Statements have been quoted from this magazine which are irreconcilable. Yet, in spite of this glaring lack of consistency, actually undependability, the following was published in Advertising the Watchtower. This is from the New World Translation of the Holy Greek Scriptures, page 793, the 1950 edition. Here's the quote. Since 1879, it has been published regularly for the benefit of sincere students of the Bible. Over that extended period of time, the Watchtower has consistently proven itself dependable. Gruss says, how could a claim be more blatantly false? Jehovah's Witnesses who today would accept and propagate the prophetic understanding and time calculations of earlier Watchtower positions would actually be disfellowshipped. Another example of false advertising relative to the Watchtower is found on the back cover of the January 8, 1970 issue of Awake. Quote, for 90 years, this faithful journal has been pointing forward to this very time, urging people to turn to the Bible because of the spiritual famine that the Bible itself foretold was to come in our generation. End of quote. It is obvious from what has been presented elsewhere in this book that this statement is also false and that it almost completely expunges the prophetic interpretations, observations, and views on chronology given by Russell between 1877 and 1914. The present witness leadership has cleverly and conveniently forgotten the past. The fact remains that these two ads for the Watchtower are obvious examples of false advertising. Now under the head False Prophecy. It is one thing for the present writer, on the basis of the Bible and other evidence, to declare that the Watchtower Society is guilty of false prophecy and that individuals, such as Russell, Rutherford, and other leaders, were individually false prophets. It is another thing to find that the Society, through its own publications, reveals itself and its leaders to be false prophets without God's enlightenment. How can this be? The following is quoted from the October 8th, 1968 Awake. Again, that famous issue, Is It Later Than You Think? The article is entitled, A Time to Lift Up Your Head in Confident Hope. And here's the quote. True, there have been those in times past who predicted an end to the world, even announcing a specific date. Some have gathered groups of people with them and fled to the hills or withdrawn into their homes, waiting for the end. Yet nothing happened. The end did not come. They were guilty of false prophesying. Why? What was missing? Missing was the full measure of evidence required in fulfillment of Bible prophecy. Missing from such people were God's truths and evidence that he was guiding and using them. End of quote. That's Awake, October 8, 1968, page 23. While it is true, Gruss says, that the Bible students or witnesses of today did not flee to the hills or withdraw to their homes to wait for the end, it is also true that the movement did set specific dates for the end of the world, for example, 1914. Such an erroneous prediction would make them, too, guilty of false prophesying. How is this false prophesying explained? Again, their words, missing from such people were God's truths and the evidence that he was guiding and using them, says Awake. Would this not also apply to the Watchtower Society? Surely the Society cannot escape the implications of its own words. Remember the words of Christ, by the measure you measure out, it will be measured to you. And out of your own mouth I judge you. Next time, false prophecy and false Christianity. I'll put in a link to our discussion of The Time Is at Hand, the first and the revised editions. The first one is about the 7 predictions Russell made in regard to 1914. And I'll put in a link to that playlist too, which was, Have Jehovah's Witnesses Ever Been God's Organization? See you shortly.